Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story behind one of the most legendary personal finance books ever, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it all kicks off not with some complex formula, but with a really powerful lesson from when the author was just a kid. So, this one idea is the heart of the whole book. And it sounds kind of backward, right? It's a lesson that didn't come from a textbook or a classroom. Nope, it started with a pretty painful question that a young boy was forced to ask. So, let's set the scene. We've got the author, Robert Kiyosaki. He's just 9 years old, and he runs into a problem that, a lot of kids face. But this one had a real sting to it. Okay, so imagine that. Being left out of a party just because your family doesn't have as much money. That feeling of rejection, being labeled a poor kid, that lit a fire under him. He was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to figure this money thing out once and for all. So he goes to his dad, his poor dad, and asks for advice. And his dad's response is pretty straightforward. Well, if you want to be rich, you got to learn to make money. Simple enough, right? So Robert and his buddy Mike take this advice maybe a little too literally. Their first business venture? Yeah, let's just say it was creative and not exactly on the level. So yeah, his dad walks in and finds them basically printing fake money. He shuts that down immediately, of course. But here's the interesting part. He wasn't just mad. He actually praised them. He said, look, you guys took action. You tried something. And that spark of initiative was enough for him to point them towards someone who could really teach them, Mike's dad, the man who would become his rich dad. Now, Rich Dad wasn't the type to just sit them down and give them a lecture. No way. He believed in learning by doing. So instead of just handing them the answers, he throws them right into the deep end with a real-world lesson. And trust me, it was a harsh one. So what was this grand lesson? Dusting cans in a convenience store for a measly 10 cents an hour. I mean, can you imagine? For 3 straight weeks, they missed their Saturday baseball games to do this boring, mind-numbing work for basically nothing. Robert was furious. He felt used, and he was absolutely ready to walk. And when Robert finally confronts him, Rich Dad's response is just perfect. He basically says, good, now you sound like all my other employees. You see, he wasn't trying to be cruel. He was deliberately pushing Robert's buttons to show him what the typical employee mindset feels like from the inside. He told him, look, most people, when life pushes them like this, with a bad job or low pay, they just give up. They either quit and find another job that's pretty much the same, or they just accept it and complain. They get trapped in this endless cycle he called the rat race. So what is this rat race exactly? What is this trap that so many of us feel stuck in, just working to pay the bills? Well, according to Rich Dad, the whole thing runs on 2 really powerful emotions that pretty much dictate how most people handle money: fear and desire. Think about it. The fear of not being able to pay your bills. That's what gets you up and to work every single morning. But then you get paid. And what happens? Desire kicks in. Ooh, that new phone looks good. I could use a nicer car. Maybe a bigger apartment. And boom, the money's gone. You're right back where you started, trapped in this loop where your money completely controls you, instead of you controlling your money. So, how do you break the cycle? You might think the answer is a pay raise, right? Nope. Rich Dad's solution was something else entirely. Another one of his backward-sounding challenges that, at first, seemed to make things even worse. He knew that to really break them out of that paycheck-to-paycheck thinking, he had to do something drastic. His reasoning was actually brilliant. He figured if you take the tiny little paycheck out of the equation, you stop thinking about it. Your brain is then forced to look around and find other ways to make money. Bigger, better ways. It forces you to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. And wouldn't you know it, it worked. Without that measly 10 cents an hour distracting them, their eyes were suddenly open. They noticed something that every other employee had been walking past every single day. The comic book distributor was just throwing out the old, unsold comics. They saw a golden opportunity where everyone else just saw garbage. And what they did with it was just genius. Okay, check this out. First, get the old comics for free. Step 2, open a comic book library in an empty basement. Then charge other kids 10 cents to come in and read as many comics as they want. I mean, what a deal for the kids. And the best part? They hired Mike's sister to be the librarian. This meant their little business was making money even when they weren't physically. And this, right here, is where it all clicks into place. Just look at the dramatic difference between the 2 approaches. I mean, the contrast is just wild. When they were thinking like employees, they were miserable,
earning a pathetic 30 cents a week. But when they started thinking like business owners, they were raking in $9.50 a week. That's more than 30 times as much. Plus, they got their Saturdays back, and they created a job for someone else. They went from trading their time for pennies to owning a real asset. That's it. That's the light bulb moment. They weren't just working anymore. They were business owners. Their money was now working for them, not the other way around. And that's the fundamental difference.
And that brings us right back to that very first idea. The rich don't work for money. Instead, they spend their time building or buying assets, things like their comic book library or real estate or businesses, things that put money in their pocket. Once you stop focusing on just trading your time for a salary, your mind opens up and you start to see these kinds of opportunities everywhere.
So the big question this whole story leaves you with is a pretty powerful one. What are the unsold comic books in your life? What huge opportunities are sitting right there in plain sight, just waiting for you to stop thinking about the next paycheck and actually see them?